and it's chapter 15. About halfway to Nyx's temple, I realised that Stevie Ray was being unusually quiet. I glanced sideways at her. Was she also looking pale? I got a creepy walk over your grave feeling. Stevie Ray, is something wrong? Well, yeah, it's sad and kind of scary. What is? The full moon ritual? My stomach started to hurt. No, you'll like that, or at least you'll like this one. I knew what she meant. Versus the Dark Daughters ritual I had to go to afterward. But I didn't want to talk about that. Stevie Ray's next words made the whole issue of the Dark Daughters seem like a small, secondary problem. A girl died last hour. What? How? They all die. She didn't make the change, and her body just... Stevie Ray paused, shuddered. It happened near the end of Taekwondo class. She'd been coughing, like she was short of breath, at the beginning of our warm-up exercises. I didn't think anything of it, or maybe I did, and I put it out of my mind. Stevie Ray gave a small, sad smile, and she looked ashamed of herself. Was there any way to save the kid? After, they start. I broke off and made a vague, uncomfortable gesture. No, there's no way you can be saved if your body starts to reject the change. Then don't feel bad about not wanting to think about the girl who was coughing. There's nothing you could have done anyway. I know, it's awful. And Elizabeth was so nice. I felt a sharp jolt somewhere in the middle of my body. Elizabeth, no last name? She's the girl who died? Stevie Ray nodded, blinking hard, obviously trying not to cry. That's horrible, I said. My voice was so weak, it was almost a whisper. I remembered how considerate she'd been about my mark, and how she'd noticed Eric looking at me. But I just saw her in drama class. She was fine. That's how it happens. 1 second the kid sitting next to you seems perfectly normal, and the next... Stevie Ray shivered again. And everything's going on like normal, even though someone at the school just died. I remembered that last year, when a group of sophomores from SIHS had been in a car accident one weekend, and 2 of them had been killed. Extra counsellors had been called into school on Monday, and all the athletic events had been cancelled for that week. Everything goes on like normal. We're supposed to get used to the idea that it might happen to anyone. You'll see uh, everyone will act like nothing happened, especially the upperclassmen. It's just third formers and good friends of Elizabeth, like her roommate, who'll show any reaction at all. The third formers, that's us, are supposed to act right and get over it. Elizabeth's roommate and best friends will probably keep to themselves for a couple of days, and then they'll be expected to get it together. She lowered her voice again. Truthfully, I don't think that the vamps think any of us as real until we actually change. I thought about this. Nefrite didn't seem to want to treat me as anything other than temporary. She'd even said that it was an excellent sign that my mark was coloured in entirely, and that I was not that I would, hold on, not that I was as confident as she. That is an odd sentence. Tell you what, we'll back it up and start from the beginning. Nefrite didn't seem to treat me like I was temporary. She even said that it was an excellent sign that my mark was coloured in already, not that I was as confident. Not that I was as confident as she seemed to be about my future. That was because she was saying it. But I absolutely was not going to say anything that might sound as if Nefrite was giving me special treatment. I didn't want to be the weird one. I just wanted to be Stevie Ray's friend and fit in with my new group. That's really awful, was all I said. Yeah, but at least if it happens fast. Part of me wanted to know the details, and part of me was too scared to even ask the question. Thankfully, Shawnee interrupted before I could make myself ask what I was too freaked out to want to know. Just pleased with it taking so long, Shawnee called from the front steps of the temple. Erin and Damien are already inside, saving a place in the circle for us. But you know that once the ritual starts, they won't let anyone else in. Hurry up! We rushed up the steps, and with Shawnee leading us, we hurried into the temple. Sweet, smoky incense engulfed me as I entered into the dark, arched foyer of Nyx's temple. Automatically, I hesitated. Stevie Ray and Shawnee turned to me. It's okay. There's nothing to be nervous or scared about. Stevie Ray met my eyes and added, At least, nothing in there. The full moon ritual is great. You'll like it. Oh, when the vamp traces the pentagram on your forehead and says, Blessed be, all you have to do is say, Blessed be, back to her, Shawnee explained. Then follow us over to our place in the circle. She smiled reassuringly at me and hurried ahead into the dimly lit interior room. Wait, I grabbed Stevie Ray's sleeve. I don't want to sound stupid, but isn't a pentagram a sign of evil or something like that? That's what I thought too until I got here. But all that evil stuff is bull that the people of faith want you to believe, so that, heck, she said with a shrug. I'm not even sure why they're so set on people, well, humans that is, believing that it's an evil sign. The truth is that for like a zillion years, the pentagram has stood for wisdom, protection, perfection, good stuff like that. It's just a five-pointed star. Four of the points stand for the elements. The fifth is for the one that points up, is for the one is for spirit. And that's all it is. No boogeyman there. Control, I muttered, glad that we had a reason to quit talking about Elizabeth and death. Huh? The people of faith want to control everything, and part of that control is everyone has to always believe exactly the same. That's why they want people to think that the pentagram is bad. I shook my head in disgust. Never mind. Come on. I'm readier than I thought I was. Let's go in. We walked into the foyer and heard running water. We passed a beautiful fountain, and then in the entryway it curved gently to the left. Within a thick, arched stone doorway stood a vampire I didn't recognize. She was dressed entirely in black, a long skirt, a silky, bell-sleeved blouse. The only decoration she had on was a silver embroidered goddess figure over her breast. Her hair was long and the colour of wheat. Sapphire-coloured spirals radiated from her crescent moon tattoo down to her flawless face. That's Anastasia. She teaches the spells and rituals class. She's also Dragon's wife, Stevie Ray whispered quickly before she stepped up to the vampire and respectfully placed her fist over her heart. Anastasia smiled and dipped her finger in a rock bowl that she was holding. She traced a five-pointed star on Stevie Ray's forehead. Blessed be, Stevie Ray, she said. Blessed be, Stevie Ray responded. She gave me an encouraging look before she disappeared into the smoky room beyond. I took a deep breath and made a conscious decision to put all thoughts of Elizabeth and death and what ifs out of my mind, at least during this ritual. I moved purposefully into the space in front of Anastasia, mimicking Stevie Ray. I placed a closed fist over my heart. The vampire dipped her finger in what I could now see was oil. Merry meets, Zoe Redbird. Welcome to the House of Night and your new life, she said, as she traced the pentagram on my forehead over my mark. And blessed be. Blessed be, I muttered, surprised at the electric shiver that passed through my body when the damp star had taken form on my forehead. Go on in and join your friends, she said kindly. There's no need to be nervous. I believe the goddess is already looking after you. Thank you, I said, and hurried into the room. There were candles everywhere. huge white ones suspended from the ceiling in iron chandeliers. Big candle trees held more of them, and they were lining the walls. In the temple, uh, in the temple, sconces didn't burn oil tamely in lanterns like the rest of the school. Here, the sconces were real. I knew that this place used to be a people of faith church dedicated to St. Augustine, but it looked like no church I'd ever seen before. Besides being lit by only candlelight, there were no pews. And, by the way, I really dislike pews. Could they be any more uncomfortable? Actually, the only furniture in the big room was an antique wooden table situated in the centre. I was kind of like the same one in the dining hall, except this one wasn't just so loaded with food and wine and such. This one also had a marble statue of the goddess, arms upraised and looking a lot like the embroidered design that the vamps wore. There were there was a huge candelabrum on the table, and its fat white candles burned brightly, as well as several thick sticks of smoking incense. Then my eyes were caught by the open flame burning from out of a recess in the stone floor. It flickered wildly, its yellow fire almost waist high. It was beautiful, in a controlled danger kind of way. It seemed to draw me forward. Thankfully, Stevie Ray's waving hand snagged my attention before I could follow my impulse to approach the flame, and I noticed, wondering how I could have failed to see her in all this from the beginning. There was a huge circle of people, students as well as adult vamps, stretching around the edges of the room. Feeling nervous and awestruck at the same time, I made my feet move so I could take my place in the circle beside Stevie Ray. Finally, Damien said under his breath. Sorry we're late, I said. Leave her alone, she's nervous enough as it is, Stevie Ray told him. Shh, it's starting, Shawnee hissed. Four forms seemed to materialize from within the darkened corners of the room to become women who made their way to the four spots just within the living circle. Like the directions on a compass, two more entered from the doorway through which I'd just come. One was a tall man, well, scratch that, male vampire. All of the adults were vampires, and, oh my god, he was hot. Now, here was an excellent example of a stereotype of a gorgeous vamp guy, up close and personal. He was over 6 feet tall and looked like he belonged on the big screen. And there was the only reason that I'm taking a damn poetry elective, Shawnee whispered. I'm with you there, twin, Erin breathed dreamily. Who is he? I asked Stevie Ray. Lauren Blake, Vampire Poet Laureate. He was the first male poet laureate in over 200 years. Literally, she whispered. And he's only like 20 something. And that's in real years, not just in looks. Before I could say anything else, he started to speak, and my mouth was too busy flopping open at the sound of his voice for me to do anything but listen. She walks in beauty like the night on cloudless chimes and starry skies. As he spoke, he moved slowly towards the circle, as if his voice was music. The woman who had entered the room with him began to sway and then to dance gracefully around the outside of the circle. And all that's best of dark and bright meet in her as, meet in her aspect and her eyes. The dancing woman had everyone's attention. With a jolt, I realized it was Neferit. She was wearing a long silk dress that had tiny crystal beads sewn all over it, so that the candlelight caught each of her movements and made her shimmer like the star-filled night sky. Her movements seemed to call alive the words of the old poem, at least in my mind. I was still working well enough to have recognized it as Lord Byron's She walks in beauty, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven too gaudy day denies. Somehow both Neferit and Lorien managed to end up in the centre of the circle as he finished reciting the stanza. Then Nefri took a goblet from the table and lifted it, as if offering a drink to the circle. Welcome, Nyx's children, to the goddess's celebration of the full moon. The adult vamps chorused, Merry meet. Nefrit smiled and put the goblet back on the table and picked up a long, white taper that was already lit and sitting in a single candlestick holder. Then she walked across the circle to face a vamp who was I didn't know who was standing at what must be the head of the circle. The vamp saluted her, hand over breast, before turning around so that her back was to Neferit. Psst, Stevie Ray whispered. We all face each of the four directions as Neferit invokes the elements and casts Nyx's circle. East and air come first. Everyone, including me, even though I was kinda slow, turned to face east. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Neferit raise her arms over her head as if her voice rang against the stone walls of the temple. From the east, I summon air and ask that you carry to this circle the gift of knowledge that our ritual will be filled with learning. The instant Nefrit began speaking the invocation, I felt the air change. It moved around me, ruffled my hair, and filling my ears with the sound of wind sighing through leaves. I looked around, expecting to see everyone else had been caught in a mini whirlwind, but I didn't notice anyone else's hair getting messed up. Weird. The vampire who was standing to the east pulled a thick yellow candle from the folds of her dress, and Nefrit lit it. She lifted it into the air and then placed it, flickering, at her feet. Turn to the right for fire, Stevie Ray whispered again. We turned, and Nefrit continued. From the south I summon fire and ask that you light this circle, the gift of strength, of will, so that our ritual will be binding and powerful. The wind that had been blowing softly against me was replaced by a sensation of heat. It wasn't exactly uncomfortable, it was more like a flush you feel whenever you step into a hot tub, but it was warm enough to make a light sweat break out all over my body. I glanced at Stevie Ray. She had her head raised slightly, and her eyes were closed. There was no sign of sweat on her face. The intensity of the heat suddenly jumped up a notch, and I looked back at Neferit. She had lit a large red candle that Penthesilea had been holding, and then the east-facing vamp had done, or as she had done, Penthesilea lifted it up in an offering before placing it at her feet. This time I didn't need Stevie Ray's nudging to turn again. To my right, and face west. Somehow I knew not just that we needed to turn, but that the next element to be summoned would be water. From the west I summon water and ask that you wash this circle in compassion, that the light of the full moon can be used to bestow the healing to our group, as well as understanding. Nefrit lit the west-facing vamp's blue candle. The vamp lifted it and placed it at her feet, as the sound of waves filled my ears, and the salty scent of the sea filled my nose. Eagerly I completed the circle by facing north, and I knew I'd be embracing earth. From the north I summon earth, and ask that you grow within this circle the gift of manifestation, that the wishes and prayers from tonight will come to fruition. Suddenly I can feel the softness of grassy meadow under my feet. I smelled hay and heard birdsong. A green candle was lit and placed at Earth's feet. I should have probably been afraid of the odd sensations breaking over me, but they filled me with an almost unbearable lightness. I felt good. So good that when Nefrit faced the flame that burned in the middle of the room, the rest of us turned to the interior of the circle, I had to press my lips tightly together to keep from laughing out loud. The drop-dead gorgeous poet was standing across from the fire from Neferit, and I could see that he was holding a big purple candle in his hands. At last, I summoned Spirit to complete our circle, and I ask that you fill us with connection so that, as your children, we may prosper together. Unbelievably, I felt my own spirit leap, like there were bird wings fluttering around inside my chest. As the poet lit the candle from the huge flame and then placed it on the table, then Nefrit began to move around within the circle, speaking to us, meeting our eyes, including us in her words. This is the time of the fullness of the moon. All things wax and wane, even Nyx's children, her vampires. But on this night, the powers of life, of magic, and of creation are at their brightest. This was our goddess's moon. This is the time of building, of doing. My heart was beating hard as I watched Neferit speak, and I realized that, with a start, she was actually giving a sermon. This was a worship service, but the casting of the circle and Neferit's words coupled to touch me like no sermon had ever begun to do. I glanced around. Maybe it was the setting. The room was misty with incense and magical in the flickering candlelight. Neferit was everything a high priestess should be. Her beauty was a flame of its own, and her voice was a magic that held everyone's attention. No one was slumped down in a pew, sleeping, or sneakily doing Sudoku. This was a time when the veil between the mundane world and the strange and beautiful realms of the goddess become thin indeed. On this night we may one or we may one transcend oh, sorry. On this night may one transcend the boundaries of the worlds with ease, and know the beauty and enchantment of Nyx. I could feel her words wash against my skin and close to my throat. I shivered, and the mark on my forehead suddenly felt warm and tingly when the poet began to speak in his deep, powerful voice. This is the time for weaving the ethereal into being, of spinning the strands of space and time to bring forth creation. For life is a circle as well as a mystery. Our goddess understands this, and does her own as does her own consort, Ibris. As he spoke, I felt better about Elizabeth's death. Suddenly, it didn't seem so scary, so horrible. It seemed more like a part of the natural world, a world that we all had to live in. Light, dark, day, night, death, life. All this tied together by spirit and the touch of the goddess. If we keep the balance and look to the goddess, we can learn to weave a spell of moonlight and fashion with it a fabric of pure magical substance to keep us all the days of our lives. Close your eyes, children, children of Nyx, Nefrit said, and send your secret desire to the goddess. Tonight, when the veil between our worlds is thin, when magic is afoot within the mundane, perhaps Nyx will grant your petitions and dust you with the gossamer mist of dreams fulfilled. Magic? They were actually praying for magic? Would it work? Could it work? Was there really magic in this world? I remembered the way my spirit had been able to see words, and how the goddess had called me with her visible voice down to the crevasse, and then kissed my forehead and changed my life forever. And how, just moments ago, I felt the power of Nefrit's calling of the elements. I hadn't imagined it. I couldn't have imagined it. I closed my eyes and thought about the magic that seemed to surround me, and then I set up my wish into the night. My secret wish is that I belong, that I have finally found a home that no one can take away from me. Despite the unusual warmth of my mark, my head felt light and unimaginably happy as Neferit called for us to open our eyes, and, in a voice that was at the same time soft and powerful, woman and warrior combined, she continued the ritual. This is the time of travelling unseen in the full moonlight, a time to listen for music not fashioned by human or vampire hands. This is a time for oneness with the hearts that caress us. Nefrit bowed her head slightly to the east, and the bolt of lightning that mimics the spark of first life. She tilted her head to the south, and a time to reveal the internal sea and the warm rains that soothe us, and, as well as the verdant lands that keep us surrounded. She acknowledged the west and the north in turn. Each time Nefrit named an element, it felt as though a jolt of sweet electricity sizzled through my body. Then the four women who personified the elements moved as one to the table. With Nefrit and Lorien, each of them lifted a goblet. All hail, O goddess of night, and the full moon, Nefrit said. All hail night, from whom our blessings come. On this night we give thanks to thee. Still holding the goblets, the four women scattered back to their places in the circle. In the mighty name of Nyx, Nefrit said, and of Ibris, the poet added, we ask from within your sacred circle that you give us the knowledge to speak the languages of the wilds, to fly with the freedom of the bird, to live with the power and grace of the feline, and to find an ecstasy and joy in life that would stir the very heights of our being. Blessed be. I couldn't stop grinning. I'd never heard stuff like this in church before, and I sure as hell had never felt so energized there either. Nefrit drank from the goblet she held, and then she offered it to Lorien, who drank from it and said, Blessed be. Mirroring their actions, the four women moved quickly around the circle, allowing each person, fledgling and adult, to drink from the goblet. When it was my turn, I was happy to see the familiar face of Penthesilea offer me a drink, and a blessing. The wine was red, and I expected it to be bitter, like the sip of my mum's hidden cabaret I'd, I'd tried once, and definitely did not like. But it wasn't. It was sweet and spicy, and it made my head feel even lighter. When everyone had been given a drink, the goblets were returned to the table. Tonight, I want each of us to spend at least a moment or two alone in the light of the full moon. Let its light refresh you and help you to remember how extraordinary you are or are becoming. She smiled at some of the fledglings, including me. Bask in your uniqueness, revel in your strength, and stand separate from the world because of our gifts. Never forget, because you may be sure that the world never will. Now let us close the circle and embrace the night. In reverse order, Nefrit thanked each element and sent them away as each candle was blown out, and as she did so, I felt a twinge of sadness, like I was saying goodbye to friends. And then she completed the ritual by saying, This rite is ended. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. The crowd echoed, Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. And that was it. My first ritual of the goddess was over. The circle broke up quickly, more quickly than I would have liked it to. I wanted to stand there and think about the amazing things I had felt, especially during the calling of the elements, but that was impossible. I was carried out of the temple on a tide of chatter, and I was glad that everyone was so busy talking that no one noticed how quiet I was. I didn't think I could explain to them what just happened to me. Hell, I couldn't even explain it to myself. Do you think they'll have Chinese food again tonight? I just loved the last full moon when they had that yummy moo goo stuff afterward, Shawnee said. Not to mention, my fortune cookie said, you will make a name for yourself, which was way cool. I'm so starved I don't care what food they feed us, as long as they feed us, Erin said. Me too, Stevie Ray said. For once, we are in perfect agreement, Damien said, linking arms with Stevie Ray and me. Let's eat. And suddenly that reminded me. Uh, guys, that nice tingly feeling that the ritual had given me was gone. I can't go. I have to. We're morons. Stevie Ray thumped herself on the forehead so hard it made a smacking sound. We totally forgot. Ah, crap, Shawnee said. The hags from hell, Erin said. You want me to save you a plate of something? Damien asked sweetly. No, Aphrodite said they were going to feed me. Probably raw meat, Shawnee said. Yeah, from some poor kid that she caught in a nasty spider web, Erin said. And by that, she means the one between her legs, Shawnee explained. Stop, you're freaking Zoe out, Stevie Ray said as she started nudging me towards the door. I'll show her where the rec hall is, and I'll meet you guys at our table. Outside, I said, okay, tell me they're kidding about the raw meat. They're kidding? Stevie Ray said unconvincingly. Great. I don't even like steak rare. What am I going to do if they really try to feed me raw meat? I refused to think about what kind of raw meat it might be. I think I have a Tums somewhere in my purse. Do you want it? Stevie Ray asked. Yeah, I said, already feeling nauseous. And that's the end of chapter 15. Um, it's kind of late over here, so I'm going to leave it there for tonight, but I'll stream again tomorrow and we'll do some Hunger Games. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.